he has graciously accepted to come and be with us this Saturday. And he, like I said, he is a teacher at the Island Pacific Academy. He has been a semifinalist for a Grammy Musical Educator Award, right? National Grammy Educator Award. And he is, of course, he's been speaking around the state at TEDx, right? Honolulu, and was a keynote speaker for the MISO conference in Maui. I am really fortunate to be able to share him with you. He is a teacher at Island Pacific Academy and has been. He teaches music and history, and he has a lot to say. And when I saw him on a YouTube feed that he shared with us, he captures the audience because he talks not only to parents, but a lot to professionals and teachers and what we have in common. So without further ado, Micah, would you please come up here?
I'm going to use this because this podium just freaks me out. How are you doing this morning? Everybody doing okay? Fantastic. You know, the last time I came up to UH was when I graduated from UH. So that's, I want to start with the end and the beginning. You know, this is the journey. This is why we're here. We're working with students who have learning disabilities. And every professional, every educator, and I love the theme of this conference of building bridges. Because every professional, every parent, every uncle, every auntie, and I gotta say that because we live in Hawaii, right? And because we live in Hawaii, it's really not this idea of one person raising a child. It's a whole community of people that help to raise a child. And so this idea of building bridges, I think in Hawaii we're professionals at that. We build bridges all the time. We have aunties and uncles and grandmas and tutus and kupuna who help raise our children. And so we have big bridges that span in all different directions. But I want to go into my keynote today. My favorite thing to talk about is superheroes. Seems to be on everybody's mind. There's always a movie about superheroes out there. And so I think to myself, what person at one point in their lives didn't want to be a superhero? I mean, everybody at one point has dreamt about being a superhero. There's all different types of superheroes. And when you think about superheroes, you think about superpowers, right? That's what I think about. So, I mean, and I would venture to say there are even adults here who still dream of having superpowers, right? What's a superpower you might want to have? What's a superpower you might want to have? Flying, for sure. I tried that. it didn't work so good. But yes, flying off the roof of your garage. Not a good idea, but I did try that. Flying. What's another superpower out there? Oh, invisibility. Every middle school boy wishes he was that. Invisibility. That's awesome. So we have flying, invisibility, you know, speed, right? Able to move really quickly, right? Change your shape, turn into an animal. These are all different superpowers. And so you've named one. I had about 30 growing up of all the superpowers I wanted to be. But I didn't really realize that I was a superhero until about middle school. See, I didn't think I was a superhero. Actually, I thought I was just a regular kid. This is what I looked like when in kindergarten. Yeah, cute kid. Me and my sister were 18 months apart. Yeah, I thought I was like just, you know, a regular, normal kid. This is a kid going into kindergarten, and I didn't think I was a superhero. I mean, I later would find out that I really was. But but this is what I looked like when I was in the first grade. Now, just so you know, these glasses that I'm wearing in this picture are reading glasses. In fact, you couldn't even walk about 2 feet before bumping into something. And I insisted that I'd wear these reading glasses. See, this is what happened. When I was in the first grade, they took me into a little room. I was going to public school, of course, you know, right, in our local district. And they took me into a little room and they had me do a whole bunch of tests. So I did a bunch of tests, and then they got a big meeting together, and they called it an IEP. Anybody who doesn't know what an IEP is? Do you guys know what an IEP is? Yeah, he does. He's like raising, I know what an IEP is. Okay, so it's an individual education plan. And they said, we've tested you, and you are ADHD and dyslexic. And I said, all right. I had no idea what that meant. I was like, that's fantastic. And they said, what sealed the deal was they told me that you are these two things, and because of that, you get to be in special education. I was like, what? Special education? Special? I mean, do you understand what the word special is to a 6-year-old? If you're going to special education, I mean, that means if you're special, I mean, that's like a dip cone in sprinkles. I mean, that is the cream of the crop. And so they told me I was in special education and I was ADHD and dyslexic. And so, and it came with a lot of compliments. He's really bright. And he's, you know, he's so talented, and he's so outgoing. He's really, really, really enthusiastic. So enthusiastic. And I thought to myself, wow. You know, I left that meeting and I felt like, wow, I am the greatest. I am the greatest person in the whole wide world. And I remember the first day they came to my classroom and said that I get to go to my special education class. And it was amazing because I think, and the problem with ADHD kids, and you have to know this, I mean, I'm an ADHD adult now, and I remember everything back a little different than what it probably was. But my own ADHD brain remembers standing on my chair, maybe on my desk, shouting out to the masses of the class. And in my ADHD mind, there was over 100 people in my class. There's probably only about 15. But 100 of them, and I yelled at the top of my lungs, ladies and gentlemen, I am leaving the classroom. I am going to my special education class. I'm sorry that you cannot attend because you do not have ADHD and dyslexia like me. So farewell. I am leaving. I will leave you at this time. And so I left and I went to my special classroom. Proud as can be, I remember walking down that hallway, and then I entered this classroom and I noticed that all the kids in this classroom were the kids that got picked on in school. And I noticed that these were some of the kids that got teased on the playground. These were the kids that kind of got in a lot of trouble, who didn't quite have recesses. And so I walked and I thought, oh, wait a minute. This is the wrong classroom. I'm supposed to be in the special education classroom. They're like, yeah, this is the special. No. The special one, you know, for the special kids. They're like, this is the special kids. I said, hey, you got this wrong. I have ADHD and dyslexia, 2 of them, right? I'm talented, very enthusiastic, and this cannot be the place for me. I know these kids. This isn't my place. And so they said, no, this is. And so I quickly learned, really at an early age, that I learned very early that special didn't necessarily mean special. And it's no knock against special education. It was at a time when we just really didn't understand that definition of special, okay? And it was just a place to send children. And to some extent, that still kind of happens today. We still kind of have that special place that isn't quite so special. And so what I want to do today in my talk, while I visit with you today, is I want to talk about my self-story and how I made it to here, UH, the University of Hawaii, as one of their top graduates in their American Studies program. and how that happened. Because if you work with these kids who are special, or if you have a child that's special, you might be thinking, that's an overwhelming task to see them all the way to that finish line. How do I get there? I mean, I can't even get to their next birthday, right? And how do we make it? And so I want to stand here today as a testament that it can be done. And I want to use the acronym of IEP to help us identify how we can help our children, our students, our ohana here in Hawaii. And so that doesn't mean whether they're your own blood children, but if they are your children, they're your nieces, your aunties, your uncles, your teachers, your students in your classrooms or in your groups, okay? How can we help them get there? So I want to use this acronym IEP to deconstruct the word special and rebuild it up into something new, something that I believe is special, something that is an ice cream cone with sprinkles on the top. It's something that you will want to stand at the top of your table and announce to 100 of your peers that you are going to special education and that you do have dyslexia and ADHD or whatever learning disability you may have. And you will hopefully leave today feeling as though this isn't a hindrance, but it's an ability that can enable you to do great and wonderful things. And so the first part of our acronym and in this reconstruction is the letter I. And I like to think of the letter I, and I want to redefine that as identify. Okay, too often we look at the letter I, identify. It also stands for individual. So I like to say identify the individual. Okay, when I look at this picture here, oh yeah, I did get scoldings. Every teacher in school asked me to take those glasses off. They said, those are not glasses for looking. They said, take it off. And I wouldn't take it off. And they threatened me with death to take those glasses off. And I didn't take them off. I wore my glasses to my picture, and I took this picture. And when I look back at this picture, okay, this wasn't something that I was doing that was naughty. This was my way of communicating to everyone that I was different and that I needed help. Okay? And lots of times we misinterpret the actions of students with learning disabilities as being naughty or disruptive, and it can be, right? But more so it's an inconvenience. It's an inconvenience to all of us. As a teacher, I know that. Okay, I know how disruptive a student calling out for help who has a learning disability, but it's not. We need to redefine this, right? And look at this identity or this behavior or this action as a way of calling out for help. It's a need. Identify me as someone special. So when we're looking at our children and they're exhibiting actions or behavior that may be maybe not the norm, right? And we say, stop doing that, be quiet, focus, pay attention. Please know they are paying attention and they're telling you something very loud and clear in their actions. They may not be able to communicate the way that you want them to, but they are communicating. They are telling you something. Okay? So number one, make sure that we identify. I have a couple of stories I want to tell you today. So when I was in school, one of the naughty actions, and you know, Albert Einstein, he had this great quote, right? If you always do what you've always done, you can't expect a different result, right? You can't expect a different result. And so here I am, this ADHD kid, and I am begging people to identify me as someone who needs help. And so I'm doing everything. I pull the girl's hair with the pigtails, you know, guarantee I will put a tack on your chair, anything for you to notice me. And instead of being noticed, I was put in a corner. ADHD kid, I never saw a day of recess when I was in elementary school. That would have been the best thing for me. I'll tell you about this one teacher I had. Her name was Miss Lee. Her name really wasn't Miss Lee, but I'm just always worried if I say what her real name was. But times have changed. Okay, well, we'll call her Miss Lee. So Miss Lee was my 4th grade teacher, and I was panicking. I was trying to be identified as a student calling out for need or help. And what was interesting was every day I wrote sentences over and over and over again, and Miss Lee would take us outside and have us write sentences facing the playground. Isn't that crazy? Right? And so we got to watch, and she would say, you know, if you just behave, you could be one of those kids out there. And so, being the genius that I am, I was sitting there writing my sentences, and I took my pencil and I looked at it, and I said, how can I beat this lady? I mean, she's old, she's fragile, I have to get her coffee every day. How do I beat her? And so I took my pencil and I looked at it, and I said, this is what's keeping me back from my recess. And so I grabbed the pencil tip and I broke it. And I said, Miss Lee, I can't write sentences anymore. I've broken my pencil. You might as well let me go out to recess. I was so excited. I thought to myself, this will be the first time I ever get to go to recess. I was thrilled. Lo and behold, she beat me. She reaches into her purse, and in her voice, and it sounded like this, oh, so you think you beat me. Actually, she was probably 21, but I remember her voice sounding like that. And she pulls out, and this would never happen, a pocket knife and begins to sharpen my pencil. And so there was no hope for me. I didn't really think there was any hope. And so, believe it or not, I made it. I survived elementary school and I went on to middle school. They had another IEP. This time they had a vocational IEP, and the lady in the IEP told my mother, she distinctly pulls her on the side and she says, you need to be prepared that your son will probably not graduate from high school. And you might think about having him visit with an uncle or an auntie and cultivate maybe a trade that you could do someday in the event that he doesn't graduate from high school. So when I was in middle school, you could sign up for art or band or wood shop or a different elective like that. And so my dad, he was a musician in Waikiki. He's a optometrist by profession, but semi-professional, played Hawaiian music. So music was always a huge thing in our home. And so I decided that I would go into band. And I had a very, very difficult time reading. I had really poor grades. I did really bad academically, and I got to go to my special class that I knew wasn't very special. Every single day, every week, I got to go to the special class. But band wasn't a special class. Everybody could take band. Whether you were in special ed or you were in gifted and talented, you could go to band. And so when I was in band, they gave me music, and the way that my dyslexia worked was I didn't necessarily put things backwards all the time, but I would skip over the word that had emphasis, which is really important if you think about it, right? If the cat is not black and you skip over the word not, it's a completely different message, and that can really hurt you in school. So when I was in band, I was a little bit nervous when the band teacher said that we'd be reading music. And it really stressed me out. But I went for it anyways. And as I started to play my music, I found myself keeping tempo with my feet, keeping tempo with my hand, feeling the rhythm, feeling the beat. And as I did that, I realized that I never skipped a note. Never skipped it. I hit every note every time. I could read everything. Even if I couldn't play it, I could read it. I could clap it out. And nobody pointed this out to me. I actually attributed to the grace of God that I was able to have this inspiration that hit me at such a young age that I could read music and not skip a note, but I had a very difficult time reading words. And so I just decided that as I started to read my books and my studies, I would just tap my foot. And I would tap, tap, tap. And I was always tapping around, tapping all over the place. And I never missed a word after that. Reading became music to me. And from there on, school became really easy. And then the second thing that happened in middle school is I realized that I did things really fast. I did things really, really quickly. That was my ADHD. And then I could do things way quicker than other people. And so if I did things really fast, I had a lot of time to play. And so I got things done really quickly. It was amazing. 100 problems, no problem. I could do that in 2 seconds. And so I was really lucky to be hit with this information. But I would be unfair to stand here and say that I did it on my own. So I want to share with you this next story. It's kind of a good one. You know, here I am dealing with identity, right? I want you to identify myself as someone different, someone who needs help. And so I went to my first middle school dance. And back in those days, bigger was better, right? Now we have these little speakers, right, from Bose. They're really small and it makes a big sound. But when I was a kid, they had speakers, and in my mind, I remember they reached the roof of the gym. And they had lights, and there would be a guy with 2 turntables, and he's doing a chicka chicka chicka, and he's mixing, and he's just there, and everybody's looking at him. And he was like the epitome of cool. And I thought to myself in 7th grade at my first dance, I said, that is the guy I need to be. I need to be him. If I can be him, then I will really be special. Right? I will really be that ice cream cone with sprinkles on top. And so I went to my dad and I said, Dad, I know what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a DJ. And he said, okay, you're going to be a DJ. And so, lo and behold, my dad said, can you make money? My dad loves money. He said, can you make money? I said, of course I can. Thousands of dollars. He said, all right, this is what we'll do. I'll take you down to the business office and you go out and take a business license. I will loan you $19, because that's what it costs, and you will pay me back with your first gig. And so, I venture to say, and this is probably not true, so remember, you're dealing with the mind of an ADHD kid. But this is probably not true. But I would venture to say that I was the first kid to ever have, at 14 years old, a business license. It was Music Ensemble Mobile Disco. It was very fancy. And I was MC Rhythm. It was very funny. My mom used to write my name on my lunch when I forget, and she'd like, this is for Mick Rhythm. I'm like, MC, huh? MC, Mom, it's MC Rhythm. So yeah, those are the days. She still calls me Mick Rhythm. But I like it now. Anyways, long story short, so he gets me this business license. He says you can use my speakers, which were these PA speakers that had no low, they were for singing, they were vocal singers, speakers. I had a dual tape deck boombox ghetto blaster, and I spent nights recording the mixes off of Hot I-94 off the radio. I changed my voice every time to request a song. Hello, this is Mr. Jones. Could you play this song? Hello, this is Mr. Jones. Could you play this song? After a while, they realized that Mr. Jones was the same person. And I got all the songs I needed. And I practiced dropping my tapes in. I made my own lights. You know, ADHD kids are creative. You know, I made my own lights. I contracted my brothers. I'm the oldest of 7 kids, 5 boys in the family. Contracted my other brothers. I put little cellophane, colored cellophane on flashlights, and they'd do their homemade strobe, depending on their finger cramps. Determined how fast that strobe would go. And I was ready for my first gig. So there was this sound store in Kaneohe, and this sound store, they had, it was called Music Mac. And I stopped there every day. And this lady says, you know, I see you stopping in here every day. Are you interested in becoming a DJ? I said, no, I am a DJ. I have a license. She's all, wow, you're the youngest DJ I've ever seen in my entire life. I said, I know I am. And so she said, okay. She goes, my son is having a birthday party, and I just don't know what type of music to play. Can I hire you? Definitely. You can definitely hire me. And she goes, well, how much do you charge? And I thought about that to myself. I have no idea how much I charge. Not a clue. What do you say? And so I came up with the best answer I could come up with was, a lot. I charge a lot. And she goes, oh, well, I have a small budget. How does $200 sound? $200? That's like $2 million to a 14-year-old. Oh, definitely, I'll take the job. So I thought to myself, hey, $200. There's gotta be a way. There's gotta be a way to make this. In my mind, I thought $200 was like having a party at the Waikiki Shell. And so I thought, I've got to give this lady her money's worth. And so we went down to this warehouse. It was probably just about the size of this conference room. Air conditioning was in there. I was doing my thing, popping my tapes in. Every once in a while you hear Hot I-94. And I don't think popping them in. My brother's over there getting finger cramps on their lights. And then all of a sudden I thought, this is the moment. This is just before we sing happy birthday to her kid. I said, this is my moment of greatness. This is my chance to show my true identity, to show my true special. And so I had planned this, and I had not told a single person, because that would definitely take away from the effect. So my dad, he'd been saving a strand of 100,000 firecrackers. And so I thought, perfect, a moment of greatness. And so I put it inside a dog kennel, and I brought it. And just before they were saying, okay, this is the happy birthday, they sang the song. And I said, all right, happy birthday from your DJ. I light the match. The ambulance came, the fire truck came, asphyxiation everywhere, evacuation. Highlight of my life. I went out to the car, loading up all the speakers. My dad told me, he said, so did you get the money? I said, hold on. Went back, got the check. Moment of greatness. Okay? I had a parent who was there in my corner during that time of need. So my next point that I want to bring up to you, and this is E, to explore. Explore their journey, the journey that they're on. Sometimes it might be scary, and sometimes you have to put your own presumptions, your own cool behind you. Why do you put your child on timeout? Because they need a moment to reflect. Or do you put them on timeout because you need a moment to reflect and calm down? Right? It's the easy road, right? Why do we put them in front of the television? Why do we stick a PDA in their hand? Why do kids today who are ADHD, dyslexia, or have some learning disability are amazing at video games? Because it's the easy road. It wasn't easy for my dad to take me down to get a business license, or to take me down to that gig, or to possibly, and I don't remember him doing this, but it probably happened, apologize to that lady for setting her warehouse on fire. It's not the easy road, but explore their journey. When I was in high school, I'll tell you about this real quick. You're probably wondering, what? Finally made it out of middle school alive. I was in high school. And my mother has been there through every journey. As we talk about exploration and exploring the journey, she has been there. And I'm gonna close with this idea that every superhero needs a sidekick. I had this teacher, we'll call him Mr. Johnson. That wasn't really his name, but Mr. Johnson taught history. I became a history teacher and a music teacher. He taught history. And if you remember how history is, it's the most exciting class of your day, right? The absolute, you chomp at the bit. You'll skip lunch and PE just to go to history. Why are you laughing? It's true. They do that for my history class, I think. But Mr. Johnson had this beautiful bald head, and we knew it well because he'd come into the class every day, he'd sit down behind his desk, and then he'd give us a worksheet, and then we'd fill it out, and he'd fall asleep for the remainder of the class with his face down on the desk, and all we could see was this perfectly bald head. I think people were smoking pot in the back of the classroom. There were definitely some heavy makeout sessions in class. And the grades were not very accurate in his grade book because it was accessible every day. But being a creative, talented ADHD kid, dyslexic kid, I looked at that bald head every day and I thought to myself, what a beautiful canvas. It's too bad I took band and not art. Maybe I will try my best. And so I had a Sharpie and I thought to myself, I wonder if he will wake up if I put a dot here. And so I walked up to him and placed a beautiful, perfect dot on his bald head. And he did not move. So I thought to myself, this is perfect. Either he's a heavy sleeper or he's dead. Either way, benefit. So I thought to myself, okay, let's try a second dot. So I put a second dot on his head. Still no movement, I'm going for dead, but maybe not. And so then I thought, those look like two eyes, what do we need left? Just the mouth. So I put a nice big smiley face. And for the first time in my life, Mr. Jackson smiled at me for the entire class. And it was a glorious day. But as most ADHD dyslexic kids often fail to do is realize the timing of calendars and organization. And to my astonishment, that was Meet the Parent night that night in the high school gym. And my mother was determined to go and meet my teachers. And so with dread in my heart, I got in the car and we traveled to Kalaheo High School, which seemed like it was on the other side of the country. It was the longest drive of my life. And there he was, Mr. Johnson, standing at the door of the high school gym. I walked in and he looked at me and I looked at him, but for a very short while, and then I checked to see if my shoelaces were tied, but they weren't because they were Vans and they were slip-ons. And then he told my mother everything. He said, "Do you know what your son did to me?" And on his head was the biggest red welt you have ever seen in your entire life. And my mother, and this stood out to me and it will stay with me for the rest of my life. She looked at him, and with pity in her eyes, which I thought was for me, she told him, "How in the world did he ever do that?" And then she walked in, and I was saved. And I thought to myself, I have a friend for life. No matter what came my way, it didn't mean I didn't get in trouble. I knew she had my back. And although I had this wonderful gem in my mind of what it meant I knew how to navigate my way through school, but that would have been a fleeting idea had I not had this support in my life. You know, later I'd go on to burn down my high school gym, but just a small part of it, I decided to do a Samoan fire knife dance. She helped me build that out of a machete, my mother. But that's a story for another day. The last in our acronym here is the P. The potential for greatness. And this has to do with this idea that every superhero needs a sidekick. You know, my dad, he jumped in there when I wanted to become a DJ. But it was at that moment when my mother stood up to a dysfunctional teacher and had my back that I realized that I could do anything. That every superhero and every child who's struggling with a learning disability, we have to drop that, a learning ability. My dyslexia has helped me to organize. At one point in my life, I was navigating and running 17 independent day camps all at the same time. In one day, I could do that. Okay? It has been the greatest ability and greatest resource in my entire life. With my dyslexia, I've learned to control it in a way that I can move things spatially without having to do it on paper, without having to create an outline, okay? And then once it's organized and I build my structure, I can do it at a rapid rate. All I need to do is refocus my ADHD. Yeah, that H, it's become one of the greatest, most wonderful things in my life. I'm never stressed. You're always stressed. I feel bad for you. Okay? And my mother, she's stuck in there. We need to realize their potential. Okay? We don't need to be afraid of it. Because at the end of the day, you know who's really scared? You know who's really irritated? You know who's really afraid of looking bad in front of others? It's not them. It's not the kid with the homemade fire knife. It's not the kid who drew that smiley face on his history teacher's head. And it's definitely not that kid who threw 100,000 strand of fireworks in a dog kennel in an enclosed building. It's all of us who grew up. We're really afraid of what others think of us. Don't be afraid. Embrace the journey. So remember, if you're at the beginning of the journey, identify that need, that call for help, right? Take what you may call bad behavior and identify that as a plea, a call for help, a need to be plucked out. Okay? E, explore. Don't be afraid of the journey. They've got great ideas and they will amount to wonderful things. Don't be afraid. Get him that business license. Okay? Light that fire knife on fire. Okay? Stand up to that teacher. Or, if you're an educator, stand up to that parent. Ask, what else can you be doing at home? Can you turn off that TV? And P, recognize their potential. What is the result? That's when I was born. That's my mom. That's my dad. This is when I graduated from high school. That's my mom. That's my dad. And this is when we graduated from college. That's my mom. Every superhero needs a sidekick. There are superheroes among us. We just need to find them. They have a hidden identity. Start with their sidekicks. They'll tell you who they are. I promise you that they're waiting to blossom into this. We just need to identify, explore, and realize their potential. Thank you.